The Maple Leafs have made a coaching change, but probably not the one that you expected to see. I'll tell you who it is and what it can mean for Toronto moving forward. And we'll also finally get into the second half of the Athletics Leaf fan quiz today. So that's what we got in store for you on Locked On Leafs.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Leafs. I'm your host, Mike DiStefano from TSN 1050 Toronto Radio, also known as Al's brother on TSN's Overdrive and TSN 1050's Leafs Lunch. Joining me, it's my co-host, Dave Morassutti from Sportsnet, also writer for the NHLPA. Locked On Leafs is a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so be sure to subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts from. You can also now catch us up on video on YouTube. Just search Locked On Leafs. We have accomplished our goal of hitting 1,000 subscribers. It has given us the chance to give y'all, all of you guys who are subscribed to the show, a Leafs jersey. So if you are not subscribed yet, you might want to subscribe ASAP, because next week we're going to tell you the details of how you can win that jersey. So make sure you return for the next episode on Monday. We'll have all the details ironed out as to how you can win it. But pretty much make sure that you are subscribed so that you are eligible. All right, Dave, an interesting move was made today in Leafland. The Toronto Maple Leafs parting ways with Steve Briere, the goaltending coach. I know I teased that there was going to be a coaching change. This wasn't the one that I expected to see. A couple of months ago, if I told you that a coach was going to be relieved of their duties, I didn't think Steve Briere was going to be that guy. But here we are, Chris Johnson with a bit of a CJ bomb earlier today. The tweet reads as follows: the Leafs are parting ways with goaltending coach Steve Briere and intend to do an analysis of that department while conducting a search for his replacement. And then he's got a story quickly detailing all of the information if you'd like to go and check that out on his Twitter page. Dave, your initial thoughts of this move?
Yeah, I mean, the timing of it comes as a surprise, right? You're not expecting, the goaltending coach of Leafs to get moved. You kind of expected it closer to the end of the season. They do their exit interviews, and then you see some changes happen. We saw some changes happen for the Leafs.
I should add, he wasn't fired. His contract was up. Yeah, his contract is up at the end of June, and they're just not renewing it technically. So I guess they just finally established, okay, we're not going to renew this deal, therefore we're parting ways.
Yeah, that's what kind of what I think. That's why CJ used that language as parting ways and not saying.
I saw some people on Twitter being like, oh, they fired this guy. It's like, no, they're just not renewing the contract, which still is a little, I don't want to say it's alarming, but like, I don't know. I didn't think that Steve Briere was not coming back. You rarely hear about goalie coaches being on the hot seat, and apparently Steve Briere was internally.
Well, what's interesting? Some people will probably think that maybe this was coming after that Amazon series when you saw him and Sheldon Keefe kind of go at it a little bit. So, this is a position that's so vital. It's funny because some would say that goalie coaches can be a bit overrated because there's goaltenders who never had coaches. All of a sudden they get a goalie coach and things kind of go south for them. Some teams have really good coaches. Some teams don't have good coaches. It's just kind of a voodoo thing because goaltending, there's like not one goaltender that's the same as the other, right? Like Petr Mrazek doesn't play the same style as a Jack Campbell.
For sure.
Right? So it's not like the goalie coach is telling him, all right, guys, you both got to do this. No, he kind of has to work with both of their styles and make it work, make what he wants to do work with both of them. So I'm not surprised that Steve Briere is not returning. The surprising part is that we're hearing about it now and not right after the season. So, and also that CJ says they're looking at the whole department too.
Yeah, that's what I find to be very intriguing. So they're doing a full analysis of its goaltending department. So I think it's worth noting too that Steve Briere came in 7 years ago in 2015-16. So Steve Briere technically came in with the Babcock era, correct? So
Yeah,
he's not
so was Shannon.
necessarily right. So like he's a Shanny guy, but he's not necessarily a
This.
Keefe guy. And you noted it. There was some tension in the All or Nothing series. I'll never forget the one scene that's one of the more noteworthy scenes when they were going back and forth, and Campbell had allowed a couple of soft goals or just some goals in general, and Keefe said something saying, "Ah, we got to have those," and a snarky comment by Steve Briere was saying, "What, you want him to save it going off the guy's ass?" And he goes, "F off." And it was just like, oh, all right, fiery Keefe. And so there was a lot of tension there. I think that happens in every single locker room. I don't think that is anything that doesn't happen anywhere else. It's just because we had the behind the scenes access, we saw that conversation. Not that that obviously led to the thing, but if you look at the Maple Leafs goaltending over the last 7 years since Steve Briere came in to be the goaltending coach. So in 15-16, his first season there, they had a 904 save percentage, which was 25th in the NHL. Went to a 912 save percentage in 2016-17, which was Matthews' rookie season, which was 13th in the NHL. And then they had a real solid year the following season in 17-18, a 917 save percentage, which was good for 5th in the NHL. Freddie Anderson with an all-star nod that year. They were 10th place the year after, 18th place the year that the year that the pandemic hit. 15th last year in the All Canadian division, and then it went back down to 22nd in the NHL with a 900 goaltending on average this season. And obviously, the Maple Leafs looked at that and said, not good enough. We need to have somebody, or maybe just a new voice. And what I thought was interesting about this whole thing is if you, again, kind of look at the comments where they say they're going to be doing a full analysis of its goaltending department, does this make you feel like perhaps Jack Campbell's gone? And yeah, so here's the stats,
Yeah, I
the
want to bring
analytics.
that to people on YouTube to get a good visual of it.
Yeah, you can see exactly those statistics there from at the Leafs IMO. You can see them every single year. The team save percentage while Steve Briere was the goalie coach. But it makes me feel like this team's going to go in a completely different direction, which means less likely that Jack Campbell returns and they may go with a whole different goaltending department, different goaltending tandem. Everything I think is going to be completely shifted around this summer.
Yeah, you know what? Like, I think going through these playoffs and seeing the teams that are where they are, they've got good goaltending. In some cases, we've seen elite goaltending from the Rangers and the Lightning. And then from the Avalanche, we've seen good enough goaltending get them to the Stanley Cup final. We saw Edmonton, what bad goaltending did to them. We saw in Calgary what bad goaltending did to them. For the Leafs, this is where it's a little perplexing because I didn't think Jack Campbell was that bad in the playoffs. He was not very good in the regular season when you look at the pre and post All-Star game numbers. We brought this up several times on the podcast. So I'm also wondering, are the Leafs deciding we got to stop throwing picks and huge money at goaltend? Well, I mean, you're going to throw money at goaltending when you have to sign a guy for a long-term deal like a Vasilevsky. But like, are the Leafs kind of saying to themselves too, it's almost like we have done a piss poor job at drafting and developing our own goaltenders. And that really stems from, yeah, Steve Briere probably has a lot to do with not just the NHL department, but maybe the rest of the team's goaltending situation, right? You have to think the guy that's leading the charge in the NHL, there's got to be some sort of continuity from the NHL and the AHL and how you work your goaltending system. So I think this is the Leafs just saying, this is the one position where we have failed as an organization to do what other organizations have been able to do.
That's a really good point, actually, that I didn't consider, that this could have to do with the poor job they've done in drafting and developing. So it's the development of coaches, and it's throughout the organization. You could say that Jack Campbell has developed nicely in Toronto, came here as a backup and blossomed into a 1A. I think that's pretty admirable. Same thing happened with Freddie Anderson, who blossomed into a 60 starter goaltender. I think that's pretty good, all of which done under Steve Briere. But once you get past that, yeah, there's not much in the system that has been able to flourish. And to be fair, I'm not exactly sure how much control Steve Briere has in that department, whether or not he is, the guy who's expected to, develop younger goaltenders, whether in the ECHL or in the AHL. I have no idea how much Steve Briere is expected to be involved in that, to be perfectly honest with you. But it's a good point when you look at the quote saying that they're going to do a full analysis of its entire goaltending department. It's best, I guess, to start completely fresh, brand new, bring in a full new set of eyes, and have them bring in the guys who they feel can help with the development and help, from the top down, and potentially finally be able to breed themselves a number one goaltender, or a starter at the very least, somebody who could potentially be at least the caliber of a Fred Anderson or a Jack Campbell. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Vasilevsky or a Shesterkin. They're, like generational type talents. So, yeah, I think that's actually a real solid point that I didn't think about. I just wonder what, who's, I don't know. You never hear about goalie coaches. I don't know who some other goalie coaches out there could be. I'm curious to see who they end up bringing in, and how the whole goaltending department, I suppose, shakes out. I haven't seen any reports on people who may be front runners or anything like that. Have you seen anything? I don't know if I've seen anything personally.
I haven't seen anything, right? And we goalie coaches, we hear about them, maybe analysts kind of talk about them. Like Kelly Rudy's always big on giving goalie coaches a shout out, considering his, he used to be a goalie. I always think about, Francois Allaire when he was here in Toronto, from the days that Jaguar was here and what he did. So that's, you don't hear too much. I mean, and it's funny, we always hear about goalie coaches when, a goaltender is working back from injury, and we always hear, Campbell and Mrazek are getting some extra work in with Steve Briere. Like, that's the most you hear Steve Briere's name,
right?
Is when they're doing those drills. It's probably a vital position that doesn't get talked enough, just because they're not on the bench, right? They're not, they're not one of those assistants that are on the bench. So that's probably why it doesn't get enough of the love that, of the other positional coaches, like special teams, and even, special teams generally get a little more talked about, just because you see the guy day in and day out.
Yeah, I mean, because they're not only special teams, they're usually either running the forwards or the D on the bench, and they have one of PK or power play um, responsibilities. So, yeah, typically those guys you do hear way more about. So we'll see. We'll leave that conversation where it is, and we'll update all you guys if we get any more information of whether they are interviewing guys. Anybody who becomes a front runner, we'll definitely update you throughout the coming days, weeks, months, however long it takes for them to do this full analysis of the goaltending department, and decide to see if they decide to go in a different direction. But I just want to know, specifically about Campbell. Do you feel this makes it more likely or less likely that he returns?
It all depends on, the thing is, we don't really know what his relationship was like with Steve Briere. So
it seemed really good.
Yeah, like, unless we hear that, like, Campbell wasn't happy or something was changed in his, like, that he didn't like. I mean, this is a guy that when Campbell
was a nice guy, honestly. Even if he had a problem with Steve Briere, I doubt he would even say anything. He's everyone's best friend. How could you possibly have anything mean to say about Jack Campbell?
And on top of that, this is a guy who, as soon as Campbell came to Toronto, he helped him get it, earn a starting job.
Yeah,
he's gonna, like, Steve Briere is going to likely be the reason why Jack Campbell earns a big contract one way or the other, whether it's in Toronto or somewhere else.
100%. And I wonder if Steve Briere, I don't know, travels with Jack wherever he goes. I don't know, maybe not, but
you never know.
You never know.
But also,
Yeah, absolutely. Could potentially happen. But yeah, we'll see what ends up happening there. I just like I know Campbell always had glowing remarks in the media about the job that Steve Briere did as the goaltending coach, and he thinks of him very highly. So I don't think this has anything to do with anything that Jack Campbell had to say. It's
Mhm.
just an internal thing that obviously management and potentially the coaching staff all kind of got their big brain together and said, you know what, we just need a completely new, refreshed outlook on the goaltending position, and unfortunately, that also means the man up top's got to go. So that's how I read the situation, and we'll see what ends up happening between the pipes. It's an extremely important position, and well, we'll see what happens. All right, before we get to the fan survey, we also have a question someone in the Discord wanted us to answer, so we'll get to that on the other side as well. But before we do, let me tell you about betonline.net. It's your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sport developments, news, odds, and including this year's NBA Finals matchup, the NHL, Stanley Cup playoffs, Major League Baseball, and of course, all the latest fighting news from MMA, UFC to boxing. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sport wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. We're your hosts here at Locked On Leafs. Dave, before we get into the Discord question and continue the Leafs fan survey that we started a couple of days ago, if you missed that episode or you're curious to see our thoughts on the questions that were asked, you can go ahead and watch that. I believe it was the Wednesday episode. You can either download it wherever you get your podcast from or go seek it out on YouTube as well. But Dave, before we get there, we are recording right after the Lightning Ranger game. It's just gone final. The Lightning win 3-1. They take a 3-2 series lead. Man, is that team ever freaking good. Vasilevsky is unbelievable. He has one goal out at 5-on-5 in the last 3 games that this team has gone. They were down 0-2. They're now up 3-2 in the series. And only one goal at 5-on-5 that Vasilevsky has surrendered. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Hate it. Absolutely hate it.
Do you now?
Well, you hate it, but it's also like you can't help but not be impressed with what you're watching.
Yeah.
I mean, that even Igor Shesterkin, like the goals he let in tonight, he had like a million guys in front of him.
Oh, this is absolutely the goaltending duel that we all thought we were going to get. We are getting. We are getting them. It's been a fantastic series in that regard. I don't know if I would use the term. It hasn't been as like high octane as the Edmonton Colorado series has been. It hasn't been as entertaining, but if you enjoy, the best goaltenders playing the best, doing like if you enjoy the goaltending craft, you have to be enjoying this series. I'll never forget this. I can't remember if I shared this story on this podcast or I shared it on Leafs Lunch, but I'll never forget. I went to a Dodgers game. Did I share this story on this pod before? I don't know. I'm going to share it anyways, in case someone who didn't listen before. But I went to a Dodgers game. I was on vacation with the family. We went to a Dodgers game. Clayton Kershaw was on the mound. He pitched a 1-0 complete game shutout and had the game-winning RBI. And my dad's like, "Oh, this is just the most boring game I've ever seen in my life." I'm like, dude, you just watched possibly the greatest pitcher in our generation throw a complete game shutout. It was a one-hitter, and he ended up scoring the lone RBI of the game to win the game for his team 1-0. And you think this was a waste of time? That is just ridiculous, first of all. But that's how, if someone thinks that this series is boring because it's been a kind of low event, but it's just two goalies putting on a clinic, but also two teams who are playing decently defensively sound, who are also playing, doing what they need to do to try and help out their attendees. I don't really know if that story equates the way that I thought it did in my head when I first started it. But anyways, I think it's just more so like, if you're not enjoying these guys doing what they do best, I don't know what to tell you. That's the relation with those two stories.
There have been a lot of chances. I mean, if you watched the game 5, there were a lot of chances. It was almost like nail biting. And the
Well,
language.
The Rangers could have scored like 4 goals in that third period. Like,
Yeah, like this is not because neither team is capable of producing offense. This is because you got two of the best goaltenders in the league absolutely going toe to toe,
yeah.
and it's taking a lot to put a goal in. It's not like in the Edmonton series where a kind of a weak wrister gets between Mike Smith's legs, and you're just like, "Oh, this is such entertaining, exciting hockey." I'm like, "Oh, it's exciting, but it's also." Like we all kind of said, like, if Edmonton somehow found a way to move on, like that's good luck. Like
Yeah.
even with Colorado, like they're probably saying to themselves, we are in for a little bit of a tougher time to get past one of these goaltenders.
Yeah, absolutely. Like an 8-6 or a 6-5 victory, like we saw happen in the Western Final. Those are entertaining, but there's also something to be said about a 2-1 or a 3-1 final. But you take away the empty netters, like a tight, close game. It's 1-1 with a couple of minutes left, and it's just like next goal wins, and desperation comes in. You got goalies making big stops, and then eventually someone scores, and you're like, oh, that's the dagger, because that another one's not making it past either one of these goaltenders, and it's equally as good sometimes. A nice tight, low scoring game with tremendous goaltending, but also the high scoring games with a lot of tremendous playmaking and goal scoring. They both have their place in hockey. To say all that, I do the only thing that I want to show about this game. Let's pull it up. The only highlight that I want to show on the podcast has nothing to do with what was going on the ice, but off the ice. Jimmy Fallon. This guy was in one tonight at Madison Square Garden, and this guy, yeah, you can see this video here if you're on YouTube. If you are listening via podcast, I'll kind of describe it. You can go and check it out on YouTube. But here it is. This is Jimmy Fallon realizing he's on the big screen at Madison Square Garden, dunks his hot dog into the beer, and then shoves his hot dog into his mouth, and then continues to just dummy that beer. Dummy's
Yeah, I was gonna
didn't
say I
quite
think
dummy
the
the
hot dog
beer.
got in the way of the beer.
Yeah, he struggled a little bit on the beer, I think. He had too much food in his mouth, and he was like, "Oh god, I'm gonna die," and it all ended up all over his shirt.
I
But
was
either
actually
way,
I
the
was
guy
checking
is
to see
living his life.
was he gonna no, he was okay, he wasn't gonna dunk that into his beer.
He
I was
did.
wondering if he was gonna dunk his hot dog into his beer regardless. No, he full out was gonna eat the hot dog and then noticed he was on camera because he's like, "Oh, I'm on the Jumbotron. All right."
Oh,
And he
yeah.
just so conspicuously just dunks the hot like goes from like 0 to 100.
That's so gross. That
Oh,
is so gross. This guy thinks he's Joey Chestnut, like,
I
it's
mean,
gross.
gross when Joey Chestnut does this
But
as well.
pretty epic. Pretty epic for Jimmy Fallon to do that. Okay, really quick, let's do this Discord question, take a break, and then we can get to the Leafs fan survey. So, Kebab on our Discord. If you're not on our Discord, you're missing out, because it's a great community. We're chatting all day long about everything hockey, Leafs related, draft related. There's a few great threads out there. We're going to have it in the description below if you do want to check out the Discord, so you can be part of that community, because it's fantastic. But one of our listeners, Kebab, wanted us to answer a question for him. And I said, sure, we'll do it on the podcast. So the question that Kebab asked was, do you think the Leafs add a big player to the first line? Dave, I'll let you answer it first.
Uh, at first I was trying to figure out like add what to the first line, right? Like I think the first line is kind of good as it was. Like what else are you really going to add to that first line? I thought maybe what is he going to add to the second line? Like
Yeah.
that would have been the question there. Like I honestly like you look at that first line. Somebody once a friend of mine always said, maybe you try to get another shooter on that line because like Mitch Marner's not much of a like he started popping in goals this year, but he's not known for being a shooter. But other than that, like I think that line has the perfect blend of what you need. It's the second line that needs the total overhaul.
Yeah, if we're getting crazy here, if you are wondering maybe what player, and I wonder if this is what Kebab's getting to. I really wonder if this is what he's getting to at the end of the day. Lean in, Dave. I'm gonna whisper it so that not a lot of people hear. Okay, lean in. Ready? David Pasternak. Like, I do not think that is going to happen, I will say. But I wonder if that's what Kebab's asking. Like, hey, you think they could add a big player? And there was that report yesterday by Fluto Shinzawa of the Athletic from Boston beat reporter saying how there has not been contract extension talks yet, and he could potentially be trade fodder this offseason if Boston truly does go into a rebuild. He is someone who could really net them a lot of great assets. And I wonder if that's the player that he's thinking of, because I'm with you. I don't think that it makes sense to change anything on that top line. Michael Bunting was fantastic alongside Marner and Matthews. I don't think there's any reason to add a player to that first line. The second line I could see, but if David Pasternak came along and you had a Pasta, Matthews, and Marner situation going, okay, then I could see you adding a big piece of that first line. But if it's not anything like that, I don't. I think that trio is probably going to remain intact. If anything, potentially they may get another big player. It just won't be on the first line. Like if they get a JT Miller type of guy, I still don't see him as a first line player. He's going to move down to the second line so that they can balance out the scoring.
Okay, a couple of things there to digest. One, why in the world would Boston even consider moving David Pastrnak to Toronto? Unless this has happened before, where Boston trades him to one place, and all of a sudden this other place is like, you know what? Toronto's giving us a pretty good offer.
You're Florida Panthering, what was it, Mike Hoffman? Hoffman to, where'd he go? Hoffman to San Jose, and San Jose flipped him for a better return to an interdivisional team that Ottawa originally did not want to send him to. Yeah, that has happened before.
That has happened.
I don't get the sense that
I think a team that trades for David Pastrnak wants David Pastrnak.
Yeah, I would think.
Yeah, and the other thing too is, I mean, I did say if you're going to add something, you're going to add a shooter. David Pastrnak can shoot the puck.
So, yeah, rumor has it. Yeah, pretty good at ripping the puck.
Yeah, he ain't coming to Toronto. I'm just gonna I'm gonna shut that down. Close the gate, put a lock on it. We can do whatever you need to do to. No, we're dispelling that. I'm not even going to entertain that thought. Unfortunately,
no, I agree. Just thought we could have a little bit of fun with that one. All right, we'll take one more quick break. When we get back, let's continue the Leafs fan survey from The Athletic. We started a couple days ago. Let's continue the back half of this survey, and we'll get to that next. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I am Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. We're your hosts here at Locked On Leafs. A couple of days ago, Dave and I decided to go through the fan survey that was sent out by The Athletic, and we're going to finish off the second half. We started on Wednesday. We got through about the first half of the survey, the first few questions, and now we're going to do the back half. So why don't you bring it up, Dave, and we could go through it on the screen right in front of you guys. So if you are watching it via YouTube, you can watch us. You can read the questions yourself as well. And if you are listening via podcast, well, we will, enunciate an audio via podcast like we usually do, I suppose. So let's get right to it, Dave. The first question is, who is your favorite member of the current Leafs team? Ooh, good question. Dave, do you have an answer quickly?
Man. I mean, if I'm going to just put, I think it's got to be Austin Matthews. Like, guy just potted 60. He had one of the better seasons in Leafs history in the regular season. I mean, some might get nostalgic and go with the Scarborough boy, Michael Bunting. I wouldn't fault anybody for that one. I know there's a lot of Mitch Marner supporters.
Yeah.
But I'm going Austin Matthews.
I think I probably would go Austin Matthews too. If I had to go off the board, like, because when I play hockey, I'm a stay-at-home defensive defenseman, probably not a shocker to anybody. So it typically would be a Jake Muzzin or a TJ Brody type of guy. Like, I typically have a softer spot for defensemen, but in this case, the guy who scores more goals than quite literally anyone else on the planet, yeah, I think he's suitable as a fan favorite. So Austin Matthews can be our pick here, our official pick for Locked On Leafs. Moving on.
Right. Moving on.
Is Austin Matthews already the greatest Leaf of all time?
Wow, that's second answer. I mean, I'll let you say the answers first.
Yeah, the options are yes, no, but he could be soon, or no, and he will never be. Wow.
Ouch! That like last one you read, goddamn harsh, man. Like, come on.
Yeah, that's actually ridiculous for that to even be an option. Shame on the Athletic, because I mean, I'm not going to say yes already because there's no success yet, playoff success, but I will go with no, but he could be very, very, very soon. All
Yeah.
it would take is like a run to the conference finals, and him be like the guy, score a dozen goals en route to it, and you could say, yeah, okay, this guy's probably the best Leaf of all time because he's one of the top players of all time. So I'm gonna go no, but he could be soon.
Like, and you were also wondering here too is, who is he trying to beat over, right? Like, who's above him right now? Matt Sundin, some will say just because of longevity, he got the Leafs some playoff success, so he's one. Dave Keon comes to mind for those who go back.
Yeah,
Daryl Sittler,
yeah,
another one that people go back to.
Dougie.
Austin Matthews has a potential to get past them. Comes down to longevity and getting some playoff success.
Yeah, 100%. So he's not there yet. Not there yet. Has yet to win a single round, as we all know, but could very well do it at some point if he stays. That is, if he sticks around, and we will leave that one at that and not ponder that one any longer. All right, Dave, moving on to the next one. Who is the most underrated Leaf on the current roster? The options are Michael Bunting, all right, it's a whole bunch of options actually.
Oh my
Bunting,
god!
yeah,
I didn't even realize how much it was scrolling down here.
I know. Bunting, Sandin, Liljegren, Engvall, Kerfoot, Giordano, Hall, Camp, Muzzin, Brody, Riley.
So here's my thing about underrated. People like that to me. That's a guy that doesn't get talked about enough and does so much.
Can we change it to underappreciated?
Sure.
Like for us, like that's I think underrated because like
There's
some
no
people
Leaf
think
that's
they've been better.
underrated.
What's that?
Like really, what Leaf is underrated, right? Like everyone gets talked about. Like they all get their moment in the spotlight.
That's
So I
true.
think underappreciated makes more sense.
And for me, it's TJ Brody.
Oh, okay.
Like, I think TJ Brody is the most underrated Leaf on the roster. I can't remember. Oh, actually,
Do you want me to bring that comment up? Because I know exactly where you're going with that.
yeah, why don't we bring that up really quickly? Because I think I quote tweeted it from the Lockdown Leafs account.
Yes,
Now
you
that I
did.
think about it, yeah, who was it again?
I hate entertaining these guys because I know exactly what they're trying to do, but I'm going to bring it up so that maybe our lovely listeners will go and stop the madness. Let me just stop sharing that one for a second. I'll bring up the other one.
All right, so
These guys have been a bane in my pain in my side for a long time. I've had a lot of issues with them. I was used to be actually used to be my competition in some ways, and so a site that I used to write for.
right.
This is just to get a reaction, folks. But
Read. Okay, let me set it up actually because there was more to it. Can you scroll up and see the
yeah,
top
we'll
of the
scroll.
thread?
Yeah,
So Jay Fresh Hockey, great Twitter follow. Definitely go and he does a lot of the hero charts out there. Go and follow him. And he said, "Give me your best offer for David Pastrnak." And for whatever reason, Editor and Leaf is the account we're talking about. Came up with an option that said you have to also take back. Here's 5 first-round picks: Nyes, Robertson, Niemela, But since they're rebuilding, you have to take back Mrazek, Muzzin, and Brody. So he threw Brody in as a cap dump that they have to take back. And someone said they have to take Brody. He's our best D. They respond with, Brody is not the least best D. Brody is a 32-year-old with no offense who gets paid $5 million for a team that could better spend the money. They likely won't make him waive his no trade clause, but they should. For the record, Timothy Liljegren is the Leafs' best D.
Oh yeah, here I'm gonna scroll down to his justification on that as well.
Okay, can you blow it up a little bit for me?
Okay, so somebody actually kind of went at him about that Liljegren suggestion, and then this was his response.
Yeah, so then he says Liljegren was a victim of a bad coaching decision, and he was their best defenseman when they finished 4th overall and set a team record for wins. He's also only getting better. He should have been nominated for the Calder too. So this guy's digging his heels in that Liljegren is the most underrated Leafs defense or Leafs player apparently because he's the best defenseman. He's better than Morgan Riley. Timothy Liljegren is better than Morgan Riley. Didn't you know that, Dave? According to editor in Leaf, that's just. Anyways, let's go back to the thing. That was crazy to me because I think that TJ Brody is actually one of the more underappreciated and underrated defensemen on this team because he's the straw that stirs the drink. If you have any issue on a pair, you put TJ Brody on it, and all of a sudden, that's your top pair, right? When is Morgan Riley playing his best? When he's got TJ Brody as a partner. When was Jake Muzzin playing at his best? When he had TJ Brody as a partner. When did Justin Hall look like a passable top 4 player? When he had TJ Brody as his partner. When did Mark Giordano win his Norris Trophy? When he had TJ Brody as his D partner. You're going to tell me that this guy's a 32-year-old cap dump who's not worth his contract? Baloney. This guy's actually a 32-year-old beast, a unit on the back end, who's actually the most underrated Leaf currently on this roster, in my opinion.
And I don't have another. I don't want to drop this mic. I like this mic too much. But no, I'm gonna second that because for all the reasons you stated, and at the fact that he's not the most offensively gifted player. He used to be, but his role has changed. He is now the dependable shutdown guy. Yeah, $5 million sounds like a lot of money, but where the Leafs would be without TJ Brody would be a disaster. We've been looking for a top 4 right shot defenseman. You know what? We got a top 4 guy. He might not be right shot, but he plays the right side quite better. Would you rather have Roman Polak, folks? Would you rather go back to that slapper out of the zone, icing every time he's on the ice? No, I do not want Roman Polak back. I'd rather have TJ Brody.
Yeah. All right. So we're both in agreement. TJ Brody, the more underrated Leaf. Is there not somebody else who maybe should get a little bit of love, though, that you do want to throw out there?
I wanted to give David Campbell a little bit of love, too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we saw that this guy has more offense to him than we gave him credit for.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. In all fairness, Liljegren, I think, is under. I think that Liljegren's got a lot to him, so he may be somebody who's just on the edge of being underrated. But again, that's somewhere where it's like apparently some people value him extremely highly, and it's typically if you look at his analytics, they do look really great. And if you look at that final stretch of 20 games or so in the regular season, he looked like a terrific defenseman once he got paired up with Mark Giordano. But I would say maybe give him a little bit of love as an underrated player as well. Pierre Engvall, you have any
I
love
think
there?
he has very good stretches, but I think he's a guy that I wish would be a little more consistent.
So properly rated for Pierre Engvall for you. I think he's a smidge underrated. I think that he's a little better than people give him credit for. I mean, there are segments of Leafs Nation who believe that this guy doesn't deserve to be in the lineup because he doesn't go out there and knock dudes' heads off because he's 6'4".
I used to be like that, but he changed my opinion later in the season when he actually started doing other things that he is capable of.
Yeah. Next.
So, yeah. Pierre Engvall, he's lower on the list. I think TJ Brody and then it's David Camp for me right after.
Who is the most overrated Leaf on the roster? Matthews, Marner, Tavares, Nylander, Muzzin, Riley, Kerfoot, Bunting, Simmons, Giordano. Ooh,
This is a tough one.
this is a tough one. I not Matthews or Marner. I think they're properly rated. Oh, is it the captain, Dave? Is it the captain?
I mean, for this season, well, I mean, he's become like public enemy number one in Toronto, and that would be just adding a lot of fuel to the fight. Like, is he overrated? Because a lot of people don't think he's very good right now, so that kind of doesn't work
Okay.
to that. Is it Kerfoot?
What about Morgan Riley?
You know what? Morgan Riley was one I thought that kind of jumped at me too, because when we think about what Morgan Riley when he was drafted and what he did well, smooth skating defenseman, has the offensive instincts. He doesn't play now. He played more penalty kill almost out of necessity because of injuries and all those things. Yeah, because I look at what other top defensemen, number one guys like Victor Hedman, Cale Makar, like that's the tier that people want to put him to, and he's not in that tier.
Well, I don't think any other defensemen outside of those two players are in that tier, but I know what you're saying in terms of being a number one. Like, he's this team's number one, but in my opinion, he's never been a number one. He's like a good number two and like a top pair defenseman, but he's not a number one. But there's a lot of fans out there who want to try and tout him as that, and for that reason, I would consider him slightly overrated. And it's mainly just because he's not as good in his own end as a number one has to be, in my opinion.
Yeah, like you're not going to see him out in the final minute of the game. You're going to have TJ Brody. You're going to have there's guys you will pick above him: TJ Brody, Jake Muzzin, Mark Giordano. Those guys will get out before Morgan Riley in a final minute of a game.
Him and Lyubushkin got picked on through the playoffs. Picked on. So when he didn't have that like defense, like good skating defensive defenseman, I know Lyubushkin was fine, more so when he was in his own end, but still he's not as good as TJ Brody. But Morgan Riley's a much better player when he has a guy next to him. And to me, a number one should be able to perform regardless of who your partner is. I think Riley, it's kind of dependent on what the other guy is doing.
Yeah, no, I think that I think that's a fair. Like, we're trying to be fair. I'm a fan of Morgan Riley, but I think he gets miscasted by a lot of people sometimes, and sometimes you don't really hear much about how good he is because I think people don't think his tires deserve to be pumped as much.
I'll also say this. I think Morgan Riley should also be the captain of this team. This is not at all a slander Morgan Riley segment. I think he should be the captain. I think he's a fantastic Maple Leaf, but he's not a number one. He's a top pair guy, but to me, he's just not a number one. And I think that's why I would consider him overrated, because there's a large segment that does consider him as a number one defenseman. All right, let's move on to the next question here, David. We're doing the Leafs fan survey. Should the Leafs re-sign Jack Campbell? Oh, this is the big question of the offseason, isn't it? And there's just over a month until we need to make that decision, or Kyle Dubas needs to make that decision. So the answers are yes, but only on a short-term deal with a higher AAV. Yes, but on a longer-term deal with a lower AAV, or no. Where you at, Dave?
There's a couple of things I have issues with when teams sign goaltenders. Unless that goaltender is Andrei Vasilevsky, there aren't many goaltenders that are giving more than a 5-year contract to. So it depends on what they mean by a longer term deal. I'm assuming that means 5 years.
I would go four. Let's put at 4. So 3 or less would be shorter. 4 or more would be longer to me.
I don't think you can give him a 4-year deal. Just because you're giving that to a bona fide starter, and he hasn't proven that he can be the guy to take the net as a starter because of injuries. Like, he hasn't done it yet. I'm comfortable with bringing Jack Campbell back. Shorter term makes more sense. I just don't like the fact that it had to be at a higher AAV.
Yeah.
Like that's the part. Like it's the way they worded these questions.
It would have made sense because the term, honestly, to me, doesn't matter. It's more about the AAV. You know, what I mean? Like the term matters to an extent. I mean, I'm not giving him 8 years at $4 million, but it would have been better if it was yes, but only at under 4.5 million. Yes, only at under 5 million. You know what I mean? Like if they gave you a threshold for what the AAV would be. So because it's the only options is like long term lower AAV or short term with a higher AAV, I think I'm gonna go with just flat out no, Dave. I don't think the Leafs should re-sign Jack Campbell. I it sounds like they're gonna go in a completely different direction. Um, and I think they can get somebody out on the market, whether it's via trade, or if it's a Ville Husso potentially to go out. Maybe they can try and persuade Marc-Andre Fleury to come in. We've talked about a bunch of different options, but it sounds like there's some large numbers out there for Jack Campbell. There's a report out of Buffalo a couple of days ago that they're getting ready to offer him. I think it was 6 times 5.65 or 7.5 or something like that. Like over 5.5 and a 5-year term on top of that, which to me, Toronto can't touch. So for if that's what the ask is, the answer is no. If he wants to come in on a 3-year deal at $4 million per, yeah, I'll sign up on that all day long. But I don't think that's going to be the case. So I'm going to go with no.
I think it's going to get too complicated because I think Jack Campbell wants one thing, and I think the Leafs want a totally other thing, and I don't know if there's going to be a compromise.
Well, apparently there hasn't even been they haven't picked up negotiations since the season's ended. The two parties. That's like last I had heard, and that was last week. So unless something picked up in the last couple of days, it doesn't sound likely. And then you hear about the goaltending, the goaltending coach getting fired. Just seems like they're going to go in a completely different direction in when it comes to the goaltending position within the organization. All right. Speaking of goaltenders, next question: which of these options do you like the best for Petr Mrazek? Roll the dice, bring him back, and hope he improves in 22-23, buy out his contract, or attach a second-round pick to a trade.
I want to twitch a little bit. Second round pick. That's what it takes to get rid of the contract.
Well, that's kind of the going rate to attach a bad prospect. I mean, go and look at Arizona. They probably brought in 4 awful contracts last offseason. Strawman, Bear. I think they even brought in. Did they bring in Andrew Ladd? Someone brought in Andrew Ladd, and the going rate was a second round pick. That's kind of what it was. So it makes sense. That's kind of the precedent for bringing in a tough deal with multiple years on it.
Oh, you know what? I'd rather just rip off the Band-Aid and do that than do the other two options.
I'm with you. Because you buy out his contract, you're still going to have $1 million cap hit next year. You'll have an $800,000 cap hit the year after, but then it goes up to $1.4 million in
the final 2 years.
The final 2 years. So 2 years from now, and that's when you got to sign Austin Matthews.
And the cap isn't going up at an alarming rate, ladies and gentlemen.
Right.
It's going up uno milione.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you attach now. They don't have many second round picks. I think their next second is until 2024 or 2025. So that's
you can get a second round pick and another deal. The Leafs, when the Leafs lost that first round pick from Carolina, people tend to forget that they reclaimed that first rounder when they moved Kasperi Kapanen.
That often gets forgot, and that is 1,000% Dubas's best trade that he ever made. Honestly,
I think it would have been the Jack Campbell trade, in my opinion, but
it's
a top 3.
Yeah, I guess, but that was you got a first round pick for Kasperi Kapanen
and a prospect that the Leafs unfortunately used in the wrong way with the Jared McCann.
Yeah, to keep one of Kerfoot or McCann, which everyone knew that it was going to end up having to be Kerfoot. Anyways, going off topic a little bit, I think we're both on the same page. Attach a second rounder. If it's a first rounder, you tell them to stuff it and you buy them out. But if it's just a second round pick, I think it's worth it for the full cap relief for the next couple of seasons. All right, next question. How many more do we have, actually? Maybe we should hold off and do these final ones. Looks like there's a few.
We got quite a few here. I think I didn't realize it was this long.
Neither did I. Neither did I. Tell you what, let's stop here. So
because it gets really heavy on the next question. Here's a
Yeah.
little preview, folks, of what we got going for the next question.
Yeah, in the hopes of making a trade, should the Leafs approach John Tavares about waiving a no move clause in his contract? Oof, you're right. That's a can of worms that needs more than a couple of
And I need
seconds.
to think about it like properly.
Yeah, just a way to convey it properly and give it its due diligence. You're right. So we'll stop it right there, and we'll pick back up with this survey on Monday. We'll go through the rest of it on Monday. But fun stuff, Dave. These are always fun. I always love doing this fan survey. It's great. It's just good content. It's a good chance to think about the past and the future. So it's fun. All right, that's going to do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcasts and platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mick_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti. You can also now follow us and subscribe on YouTube. Smash that like button. Leave a comment down below, your thoughts. Answer some of the questions that you had as well. And what are your thoughts on the whole Steve Briere firing? Does that mean that the Leafs are going to go in a different direction when it comes to goaltending? Does it have any bearing on what happens with Jack Campbell here in the future? Let us know down below in the comments. We'll be back with another episode on Monday. Enjoy the weekend, ladies and gentlemen. We will be back, like I said, Monday. And until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.